Hello everybody. Today is March 19, 2018. I began working on this project back at the beginning of the month on the 1st. And I wanted to tell you that this is not only in reference to what happened on February 14th, on Valentine's Day, at the Parkland School in Florida, but it concerns every school shooting, the shootings at the Boston Marathon, the shootings at Las Vegas, and all the other shootings that have been going around. And there is always a pigeon or a patsy involved, but there's always others involved, and a lot of the evidence is always covered up. So today I'm going to talk about high school, what I call high school shootings, but it's just not high school shootings. Now, the sources for this program that cover just specifically the latest, which is the Parkland High School shooting sources, are Intel Hub, Good Morning America, a student interview, Parkland school teacher, and InfoWars. And I would strongly suggest that you download the slide PDF file that are available to you. That if you look at the notes at the bottom of this video, you will see where you can download the slides from. And it's important because the slides are very important for you, so that you understand. And with the way that I made the PDF file is that you can click on the links and download and grab the articles and the videos that are supporting source material for this. Also, we have that the Parkland police were ordered to stand down. And we have two articles for that. We have one from the Miami Herald and one from the Daily Wire. Now, it's my contention, why were the police told to stand down and not do their job? Why were the first responders told to stand down and not do their job, where they could save lives, and instead just let the murder go on? Where did that order come from? Who gave the initial order? Who planned this entire attack? That's what I want to know. Not the patsy that they claim is responsible for the whole kit and caboodle. I want to know what's really behind it. Here are some mainstream media screenshots from the Miami Herald. The deputies were told to set up a perimeter around the shooting, and that's not according to training. One deputy said he was told to stand down. Parkland first responder says he was given stand down order. I could have saved lives. That's pretty bad if you think about it. Where did that order originally come from? How far up the chain did it go? And then here's one where the Parkland teacher says that the shooter was wearing full metal body armor, helmet, and a face mask. This doesn't sound like some high school kid. This sounds like a military operation. And if it is a military operation, we have to find out who's giving the orders to shoot our students. And we are going to take a break now, and we're going to look at portions of some videos that I downloaded. And you can see the links for those videos in the notes below.
All the kids to go outside so they could start shooting up. So they started shooting from the first floor up, because there's only 2 exits in the freshman building, so everybody started running to the other exits, so that's when the other shooter started coming up. So everybody, and then I thank God to this teacher who opened up her door and let all of us in. She got shot in the arm trying to open the door, and then the other teacher, he got shot in the head trying to protect the other students, and it was like an hour, like it felt like years waiting for them. And then after all that, we finally got out, and like they started yelling at us to keep focused and pay attention ahead, the army people, because they didn't want us to see the bodies that they hid in the corners. They were putting mats over them so we wouldn't see them, but there was dust all over the floor from this weird stingray screw in there. They were trying to.
So you think there was more than? Do you think there was more than one shooter?
There's 3 shooters. Definitely.
How terrifying! Hold on one second now. How terrifying!
It was pretty damn terrifying because they were putting us through drills, and we all thought this was a drill. We thought this was a drill, but it wasn't. And then we just started hearing the gunshots, and it was really terrifying because my class, the class I ran into, he started shooting through the door, and he came through, and he started shooting the cabinets, and that's when he shot the teacher. And then he ran back outside to shoot the other teacher who was closing the other door for the kids, but he didn't get to close the door, and he was just there. And so we were all just shushing each other, like, shut up, just suck it up if you're crying, because we're not trying to get shot. Because he was in the hallway yelling, hey, hey, trying to taunt us and get us to say things, trying to get us outside. And that's when some other kid, like, he ran out because he thought it was free, but he got shot, and then we heard the groaning outside, and we couldn't do anything.
Well, so the shooter, tell me, besides, hey, what was he saying during
He wasn't doing anything. He was legit, he just ran up the stairs, started shooting, and you could see a bunch of kids just going down that way, but stopping, but because the other shooter was coming. So everybody was screaming and stuff? Everybody was trampling each other, because they were like, hey, do you hear that loud banging sound? And we all thought it was like some kid joking on the stairwell because they're hollow, so you could just hit a stick and it sounds like it. But then we all were like, oh, this is real, so we all just started running. It was really...
Now, one student told me that the shooter was wearing a bulletproof vest and a helmet. Did you see that?
I saw some other kid. When the other kid who came into the classroom, he was wearing some type of thing, and like, I don't know, but it was like, I froze at that moment, because you never know, because when the gun is like pointed towards you and like the thing, you don't know what to do, and you kind of just like pause, and you're just like, is this actually going to happen? But I felt like he was going after all the teachers, because a bunch of teachers got shot, and any of the kids who were in the way, they got shot. Did you know? You didn't know him?
All right, Daryl, Lawson live coming to you from Southern California here. It's 5:08 p.m. It's February 26, 2018. It's Monday, marvelous Monday. This is Daryl Lawson live coming to you from Southern California here. Great time to be alive. If you're born again, spirit-filled, it's a beautiful time to be alive. Yep. I want to do a quick video here on the Parkland teacher who came out this morning on, was it new? No. New this morning. GMA, Good Morning America. Hero, Florida teacher speaks up. This was on GMA, Good Morning America. That's what I was looking for. It says here, this is from, I'm going to read from 2 specific websites, intelhub.com and also from infowars.com. Here's some of the headlines. Parkland teacher says that the shooter on Valentine's Day was wearing a full metal body armor. What the? Helmet and face mask. It says survivor offers strange description of encounter. Now this came hot off the press today. It says new this morning. Hero Florida teacher speaks out. It was the most awful sight I've ever seen. This is from Good Morning America. You know, if you read this, it's really bizarre. And like I said, never be afraid of looking at the headline news. We can't allow CNN, ABC, MSNBC, even Fox News, other ones, BBC, this, that, and the other mainstream media, to give us the interpretation of what's going on. I mean, seriously? Wow. I don't think you can really know what's going on unless your eyes are open and your ears are open spiritually. And that can only happen if you have your sins washed away in the name of Jesus and filled with his Spirit. When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all truth, and he'll bring to remembrance that which the Lord says. Yeah. I have the verse of the day. I put verses of the day, Bible verse of the day, every day on social media, Facebook pages, Twitter, Google Plus. You can see it on Instagram. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 2. This is my verse of the day. Talking about God dealing with people on the earth, speaking in these last days. Has in these last days spoken to us by his Son, Jesus. Whom, Jesus, he has appointed heir of all things. Jesus owns everything. By whom, by Jesus, he made the worlds. A teacher who was grazed by a bullet on Valentine's Day in Florida at that shooting, while saving students during the school massacre in Parkland, Florida, offered a detailed description of the shooter during an appearance on Good Morning America, which adds confusion to the official narrative. Her name's Stacy Lippel, Lippel. She's a language arts and creative writing teacher at Marjory Stoneman High School. She came face to face with the shooter on February 14th. As she ushered terrified students into the classroom for shelter, she chronicled her encounter during a sit-down interview on Good Morning America. She said here, all of a sudden I heard gunshots in the stairwell, which is about 20 feet away from my room. And then the kids were screaming and running back towards me, toward the end of the hallway. So I just went in this then I went into autopilot, she said. Autopilot mode, where I pivoted on my feet and unlocked my door, and kids just started pouring into my room. I don't know how many kids were there, but I was pulling them in and shouting at them to get in the room. Then I suddenly saw the shooter. Now this is the part that I think this is something that I've never heard. Now I've heard other eyewitnesses stating that they were with Nicholas Cruz as the shootings, as they could hear bullets flying in other part of the school, which I'll get to here in a moment. But I never heard this before. I thought this was strange. And then you add this to the deputies. What are you talking about? Deputies didn't go into high school. It's all over. Which some are saying, well, I'm not a coward. Here's one, FoxNews.com, 8 hours ago. Florida deputy who didn't enter school during mass shooting. But now it's not just one deputy, it's several. Now he's saying, I'm no coward. Some are actually saying that... here's one. Some are saying that they were actually called, that the deputies were told to stand down and not go into school. Here's one. That one was from Fox News. And then here's one. WashingtonPost.com. Broward Sheriff investigating claims that multiple deputies failed to enter the high school. What the? And some are saying that they were actually told not to go in. Oh, mama. You can't hold back the truth. The truth is just gushing in from everywhere. Yeah, okay. You add this to this case, and then it says, okay, she suddenly saw the shooter about 20 feet from me, standing at the end of the hallway, actively shooting down the hallway, just a barrage of bullets. And I'm staring at him thinking, why are the police here? Or why is the police here? That's what she said. Because, what are you talking about? Why is the police here? Well, because the guy's in total full body armor. She's staring at him thinking, why is the police here? This is strange. The shooter was in full metal garb, clothes. Had the helmet on, the face mask, bulletproof armor, shooting his rifle that I've never seen before. This is what she said on Good Morning America today. The teacher says then she pulled her door shut, but not before one of the shooter's round grazed her arm. She described warning fellow teacher Scott Beigel, B-E-I-G-E-L, to also shut his door, adding that he couldn't see the shooter, but she had good visual of it. Wow. And then it says here in the article, it says, strangely, there have been few, if any, reports that Nicholas Cruz was decked out in full body armor. I've never heard any of the reports until today that he was in full body armor. They show him on the ground in plain clothes. I haven't read one article where the shooter was in full body armor. Yeah. Now, the teacher's a hero. But her, not only did she save the kids, but her description adds a lot of light to what's going on here. I hope President Trump reads this, which I'm sure he is. He resembled a member of law enforcement. This is what her own words. Wow. An official timeline of events maintains that Cruz arrived in an Uber at the high school, and less than 3 minutes later, he already embarked on a rampage inside the school. Cruz reportedly transported a rifle in a soft case and carried extra magazines in a backpack. A conflict arises between these details and Miss Lapel's account, as the baggage necessary to carry a full outfit of body armor would likely exceed that which has been reported. And even a well-trained individual will require longer than 1 to 2 minutes to put on the tactical equipment. Wow. And then go into the corridors. Cruz was apprehended by police in just his plain clothes after reportedly abandoning his bag and rifle at the school. I've never seen any reports except this one today on his full body armor. They would have plastered that all over the news. Why wasn't it over the news? This is an eyewitness teacher. Another eyewitness student, I mentioned this a week or so ago. Her name was Alex Mednick, told media she believes there was a second shooter because she was talking to Nicholas Cruz as shots were being fired elsewhere in the school. She said, I was actually speaking to the suspect, as she heard gunfire in another part of the school. What? As the narrative surrounding the horrific Parkland massacre continues to unravel, to the shock and horror of the nation, Miss Lapel's tale only creates an added element of mystification. You tell me. You tell me what's going on. It's just like the shooting at the Las Vegas shooting there at the Mandalay Bay Hotel. Many eyewitnesses say that they saw, there's even video of security guards shooting people in the crowd. In the crowd. There was people with eyewitness accounts that people were shooting from other buildings across from the venue of the concert in another building. And there was eyewitnesses saying there was gunfire coming out of different windows and different levels of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. And even some people said that there was people shooting from helicopters. Yeah. And now we see that a teacher said that, how can you see somebody when they're having a full helmet on, a mask on, and body armor? You don't know who they are. She said she thought it was a cop. Ooh, my mama. This is just from the news coming out. This on Good Morning America. Should we not think about this? Here's another one. This came out in intelhub.com. Teacher grazed by Parkland shooters. Bullet. Shooter was in full metal garb. Helmet, face mask, bulletproof armor. Shooting a rifle I've never seen before.
You found it. It's the real news with your host, David Knight.
All right, let's talk about the sheriff here. Also breaking late on Friday was 4 of Sheriff Scott Israel's deputies waited outside the high school during the shooting. And the Coral Springs Police Department sent 130 officers to the scene. They put their lives on the line, reports Zero Hedge, while the Broward County officers simply waited for backup at the scene as it unfolded, and what some Coral Springs officials perceived to be a dereliction of duty, but not the sheriff. The sheriff, who is responsible for the people that he hires, the people that he trains, the buck really does stop with him, but he says no. He says, if the deputy didn't have the heart to go in, that's not my responsibility. He said, I gave him a gun, I gave him a badge, I gave him the training. If he didn't have the heart to go in, that's not my responsibility. Well, you know what? There's a lot of us that don't see it that way. A lot of us believe that maybe we could get a sheriff who takes responsibility for the actions of his people. They call him Broward's cowards in the National Review. Said he refuses to go quietly, so he should be shown the door by people that he professes to serve. It is an elected office, by the way. 23 sheriff's calls involving the Parkland shooter, 18 sheriff's calls involving the shooter's behavior directly. They did nothing throughout all of that. So this is a pattern of behavior that calls into question some other things. Now stay with us. When we come back in the next hour, we're going to have an individual who is trying to get the government to actually do studies on these SSRIs, because whether the guy was a patsy or whether he was a lone shooter, SSRIs are a part of that issue. As a sheriff, I need to be here to hire more deputies. We're going to put deputies all over the schools, like those deputies that stayed outside and did absolutely nothing. 4 of them. 4 of them. It was bad enough when it was just 1, but it was 4 of them. Everybody that was associated with the sheriff's department that was underneath this Sheriff Israel did nothing. It was the police department that showed up in massive force that did something. That went in. The other people were just waiting for backup. They weren't going to do anything. And his response is, we need more people like my deputies. Well, whether you do or not, he should not be the one who is hiring them. And quite frankly, if we're going to turn our schools into a fortress of uniformed individuals, that's not something that we can afford to do. One of the reasons that so many schools have allowed teachers who otherwise are trained to carry guns in their schools, like here in Texas, and we're going to get to that. One of the reasons that they did that here and in Arkansas and other places, because they didn't have the money. Well, they're talking about some of these schools that they've held up as examples and say, look at this school is a fortress and it is absolutely terror-proof. Yeah, right. And they spend $500,000 to $1 million in addition to the cost of the school to do that. Are you going to do that when we have to be the world's orphanage here? Where we have to educate all the children in the world who wish to come here, no matter where they're coming from or in what numbers, and we have absolutely no say about that, but then we're going to turn all these schools into a fortress? We can't do that. It's a stupid, it's not a practical solution to this problem. A more practical, more cost-effective solution, but also a solution that would actually work, is to have teachers like the teacher who gave his life, even though he was unarmed, he took the bullets. If he had a gun, he could have done something about that. But no, we have, because of people like Joe Biden and George H.W. Bush, we have a imaginary gun-free zone. Yeah, how'd that gun-free zone work out? It's a defenseless school zone is what they have created here. Let's listen to what the Broward County Sheriff said when he was asked whether or not he would resign.
No, of course I won't resign. It was a shameful letter. It was politically motivated. I never met that man. He doesn't know anything about me. And the letter was full of misinformation. I wrote a letter back to the governor. I talked about all the mistakes that Hager made in his letter. It was a shameful, politically motivated letter that had no facts. Of course I won't resign.
Of course he won't resign. He doesn't know me. He never met me. You know what? I haven't met him either. But I know that if he's presiding over a police department that has more than 24 times been notified of how dangerous this individual is and doesn't do anything, and then even as the shooting is happening, they're standing outside, not doing anything, then that's all I really need to know about this guy. And it's not just Hager. It's not just the governor. We've also got the Florida Speaker, Richard Cochran, says suspend the Broward County Sheriff for incompetence for dereliction of duty. Absolutely. He's presiding over a totally incompetent sheriff's department here. Now, the governor has called for a probe, but not for the sheriff to be suspended. Meanwhile, we have other survivors. This is a student, Kyle Kashuv, I think is the way you pronounce the name. One of the students at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School said, it absolutely outrages me that CNN town hall, we had the sheriff who was virtue signaling against the NRA and against guns when he didn't even act properly. He didn't do his job properly, and then he turns it around and says guns are the issue when he failed to act properly. That's exactly what is happening here. If you're not going to accept responsibility, then step down, because you're not capable of doing the job. We'll be right back. Stay with us. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. In the next segment, we're going to have a constitutional attorney who is calling for a federal investigation into the link between psychotic drugs and school shootings. And it's about time. Because whether or not this kid was a lone shooter or whether or not he was a patsy, the drugs are at the center of this. I said this from day one. That's why I focused on the drugs. The drugs kill quite a few people that are not even using guns. A lot of people commit suicide or kill other people, and they don't use guns. So therefore, we shouldn't worry about that, right? Just like we shouldn't worry about MS-13 killing people, hacking them to pieces slowly. You know, we had a story over the weekend of a deranged individual who went into a library, attacked a 20-year-old girl, just repeatedly started stabbing her. Apparently didn't know her from what we see here. She's just sitting there reading a book. But even if he did know her, okay, he's using a knife, 10-inch knife. I think a 77-year-old man tried to intervene. He got hacked up pretty bad, but he didn't die. The young girl did. The 20-year-old girl did. Is that okay? Should we not worry about that because that's not guns? You know, that really wasn't picked up by the national media because it didn't involve a gun. If it had involved a gun, you can bet that it would have. If he had gone in there, shot her to death, and then shot the man who tried to stop him, who then survived, it would have been a national story. But it wasn't a national story because a knife was involved. As I pointed out 4 or 5 years ago in China, you had a group of guys go in with knives, killed 33 people, severely injured more than 100. But we don't have to worry about that because it's not a gun, right? It's okay if somebody hacks you to death. Frankly, I would rather be shot than be stabbed repeatedly. But let's talk about what's going on with the sheriff and with the Broward cowards. I played the clip for you where the sheriff said, of course I'm not going to resign. There's absolutely no reason I should resign. These people in the state government who are calling for my resignation, my investigation, they don't know me. They don't know anything about me. Yes, we do. We know you presided over a police department that did absolutely nothing before and during the shooting. But you want to build your little empire because that's the first thing you did. You said, oh, we're going to hire a lot more deputies to stand guard. Oh, they were standing guard, all right. They were standing guard outside. And then we have an individual who is a high school student and who deserves to be heard, as CNN would say. So why doesn't CNN listen to this high school student? Here's what he had to say.
Should be, and it absolutely outrages me that CNN town hall, we had the sheriff who was virtue signaling against the NRA and against guns when he didn't even act properly. The armed officer at our school waited outside, and then the sheriff and his men for 4 minutes let my classmates die while he sat outside and waited. He didn't even do his job properly, and then he comes around and turns around saying guns are the issue when he failed to act properly.
Evidently, there is at least reporting that he knew during that town hall, and we're talking about Sheriff Israel, that he knew that his deputy had waited outside and didn't disclose that, as you pointed out.
Not just one. We found out after this it was 4.
He says he's not going to resign. He says that he's had amazing leadership at his department. You agree with that? Where does the buck stop on this?
No, not at all. I think he absolutely needs to resign after what happened here. He failed to act on so many different levels, and him himself, he's responsible for this massive failure. This could have been easily stopped, both by the FBI and the Sheriff's Department, had they acted.
Yeah, he knew all of that. He knew that it wasn't, he knew not only that there was one deputy, he knew there were 4 deputies out there. Because immediately after that, the police department said, the truth is going to come out about this, that there was another department that did absolutely nothing. But of course, you just heard a high school student there, Kyle Kashuv, I think is the way you pronounce the last name. But David Hogg defends the coward officers. The story that's up on InfoWars, who wants to go down the barrel of an AR-15? In other words, I don't blame him. He's a good person at heart. He just couldn't go up against an AR-15. So don't blame these guys who put on a uniform, who did the training, who were standing there with a gun to do exactly what he didn't do. Don't blame him. He's a good person. He has a good heart. It's the gun. It's the AR-15, according to David Hogg. See, this is why when CNN is out there saying, coaching David Hogg, and we showed the video, and then they said, oh, we're going to get YouTube to put a strike against InfoWars for showing that video. A lot of people have showed that video. A lot of people have shown the video and commented on it. But of course, only InfoWars gets a hit for that. And it's an issue if you look at this, that CNN is obviously coaching him. Whether they wrote the stuff for him to say or not is beside the issue. They're telling him, go ahead, you can try it again. Go ahead, try it again. No, that's all right. We got time. Go ahead, do another take. They're not a real news organization, folks. And the NRA is saying that the Broward County Sheriff, you were the one who didn't protect these children. The NRA said, no, Sheriff Israel, you were the one who didn't protect these children. That is your job. You run, listen to this, the largest fully accredited sheriff's office in the United States. Oh, so obviously the issue is that we need more deputies like this, don't we? Maybe the answer is less quantity, better quality. And that might start with getting rid of that sheriff. So, yet your office failed this community, the largest accredited sheriff's office in the United States. And of course, it had many tip lines to them, to the FBI, telling them, and now they've released a transcript. It's been reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. Many people have now reported on it. One caller, they redacted the name, but they referred to her as she. So we know it was a female who knew him, said, you know, it's just so much. I know he's going to explode. Clear conscience if he takes off and just starts shooting places up, because I've now warned you about this. But of course, they didn't do anything about it. Nothing at all was done about it. Also mentioned that he dressed up as a ninja or as an ISIS fighter as part of that caller transcript. Said he's been thrown out of all these schools because he would pick up a chair and throw it at somebody, a teacher, a student, because he didn't like the way they were talking to him. All right, now it's time for a news flash, folks, something you may or may not have known. And that is that as much as we criticize these Broward cowards, the Supreme Court has ruled repeatedly that the police have absolutely no duty to protect the general public, in spite of the fact that it says to serve and protect on the side of the car. They don't have a duty to do that. They don't have a duty. How many people are asking the question, what can the government do to protect the people? Asked the Tribunist.com. However, did you know that the government, specifically law enforcement, does not have any duty to protect the general public? You might assume that this is some new decision from the Supreme Court. It's not. The most recent time they upheld this idea was back in 2005, but it goes back to the early 80s. 1981 was the first time they did this that I've seen in the review. It's long been the court's stance that essentially the American people are responsible for taking care of their own personal safety. Now, if we go back to 2005, there's a ruling from the Supreme Court. The government doesn't have a duty to protect you, even if you've obtained a court-issued restraining order. And it was the New York Times that covered that ruling in 2005. They said the Supreme Court ruled on Monday that police did not have a constitutional duty to protect a person from harm, even a woman who had obtained a court-issued protective order against a violent husband, making an arrest mandatory for a violation. The decision overturned a ruling by a federal appeals court in Colorado. The appeals court had permitted a lawsuit to proceed against a Colorado town for the failure of the police to respond to a woman's pleas for help after her estranged husband violated a protective order by kidnapping her 3 young daughters, whom he eventually killed. See, when we take guns away, it's going to be the older people. It's going to be the women who are going to feel the imbalance of power the most, because she was relying on the police to protect her. She had a court order. She thought the police would enforce that. She thought the police would protect her. Didn't happen. 1989, another case, found the same thing. The decision was DeShaney versus Winnebago County, held that the failure by county social service workers to protect a young boy from a beating by his father did not breach any substantive constitutional duty. Going back to 1981, Warren versus the District of Columbia, 2 separate cases. The District of Columbia and the Metropolitan Police Department were found negligent failure to provide adequate police services, but they said no, because these individuals, like you, don't fit within a class of person to whom they have a special duty. You understand? They're going to look out for the powerful people, not you. All right, I was just talking about how the Supreme Court has ruled multiple times that the police have no duty to protect, even when there are protection orders out. They say, yeah, we knew that. We were called. We didn't do anything. You think it's bad here at this school shooting? Yes, it is. But it is a pattern of behavior for which the Supreme Court has, over many decades, 1981, 1989, 2005, has always said that they have no duty to protect, no legal responsibility to protect. And so, as this article the Tribunist points out. Why is it then that the same government that says that they have absolutely no duty to protect the general public, why is it that they work so hard to take away your right to defend yourself? Good question. They're going to leave you absolutely defenseless against criminals, rapists, murderers, mass murderers, terrorists, because you don't, and here's the court decision, you don't fit within the class of persons to whom a special duty was owed. That's what the court said. So they owe a special duty to some people, but not you. Not you. You're not in that special class. You can't violate national security rules like some of the people in the special classes can, like Hillary Clinton. And you're not going to be protected like some of the people in the special classes can. And then, of course, there's all the billionaires pushing gun control who have their own private security, their own walled compounds and so forth. They like gun control because it takes it away from anybody that they think might eventually be a threat to them. But, of course, there was that clip that came out over the weekend. I just read you one of the Supreme Court cases here where they said that the police did not have any duty to protect the woman, her 3 children who were kidnapped and killed by her estranged husband. We had the liquor store clerks who had the ability to defend themselves. A couple of women attacked by a man with a shotgun in a liquor store. They defended themselves. You can see the story and video on Infowars.com. Adon Salazar has the story up there. They said, I'm not even sure how he got away with his life at this point, says a police officer. And they said, we are not going to be victims. That's what the women said. None of us are going to voluntarily be victims. We're going to fight this. But as we look at this, and as we look at the stand down, it goes a little bit perhaps beyond the idea that the police have no special duty to protect people. The Gateway Pundit asked this question. Were the 3 Broward County deputies outside the school shooting given a stand down order? Were they told deliberately to stand down? When the Coral Springs police officers arrived, they could not believe what they saw. Many officers were surprised to find not only that Broward County Sheriff's Deputy Scott Peterson, the armed school resource officer, had not entered the building, but that 3 other Broward County Sheriff's deputies were also outside the school and had not entered. Coral Springs Police Department told CNN the deputies had their pistols drawn. They were behind their vehicles. The sources said not one of them had gone into the school building. And so Gateway Pundit asked the question, how likely is it that there were 4 cowardly deputies all standing outside the school during the madman's rampage? How is it that the neighboring police department officers were the first ones to enter the building? Neighboring police from Coral Springs released an interesting statement the day after the shooting. They said the truth is eventually going to come out. They said, I understand another agency has given the impression that it had provided the majority of the rescue efforts and that the tremendous work of the Coral Springs police and fire departments has not been recognized. Please know this issue will be addressed and the truth will come out in time. Well, the truth did come out. It came out on a Friday evening, which is where you go to bury information in the news cycle. And they finish up and say, every police officer I know would not hesitate to assist a child in danger. Were the Broward County deputies, therefore, given a stand-down order? That's a good question. It's a question that needs to be asked. Whether or not CNN and YouTube want to shut us down, that's a question that needs to be asked. And here's a video from a teacher who was there, who helped to shelter kids. So she's a hero teacher. And this is what she had to say. She said the shooter was dressed like a cop in full SWAT tactical gear. Here's that clip.
Begun. I was about 2 feet away from my door. All of a sudden, I heard gunshots in the stairwell, which is about 20 feet away from my room. And then kids were screaming and then running back towards me and towards the end of the hallway. So I just went in this very strange autopilot mode where I pivoted on my feet. I unlocked my door, and then kids just started pouring in my room. I don't know how many kids were in there, but I was pulling them and getting them in and shouting at them to get in the room. And then I suddenly saw the shooter about 20 feet from me, standing at the end of the hallway, actively shooting down the hallway, just a barrage of bullets. And I'm staring at him thinking, why is the police here? This is strange, because he's in full metal garb, helmet, face mask, bulletproof armor, shooting this rifle that I've never seen before. I don't know when I decided it was the right time to close the door. I grabbed the handle with both hands, and that's when I got nicked.
Notice that the ABC reporter didn't ask any follow-up questions when she said that. You would think she would question that.
As I'm closing my door, I'm shouting at my next-door neighbor, Mr. Scott Beagle, to close his door. And he's the kind of man that would just keep that door open a little longer. You know, he's all about the kids, you know, but he couldn't see the shooter. I had a good visual of him, which is why I yelled at him to shut his door now.
And of course, she goes on to say in that interview that he did not shut his door. He couldn't see the shooter, and he was killed along with several people in his classroom. A couple of individuals shot her classroom. The window was shut out. But she said the gunman was dressed in full SWAT gear, firing down the hall, and dressed in helmet, so forth. And yet that ABC reporter never mentioned that. And you look at the lower thirds, and it says she was hero Florida teacher speaks out, was grazed by bullet while shielding students from the shooter. Doesn't say anything about that amazing statement that she had to make. That was noticed by True Pundit, and that is an amazing statement. An amazing statement. That needs to be addressed, but let's not pay any attention to that because we've got a narrative to sell here. ABC, the legacy media, CNN, very aggressively pushing a narrative that we are not allowed to question. We're not even allowed to question a sheriff, all of whose deputies did nothing before and during the shooting, did nothing. And so the question is why? Why didn't they do anything? Certainly they'll say, well, we don't have any responsibility to do that. The Supreme Court has said that 3 times. But maybe something else is involved here. Are we allowed to ask that question? You should be asking that question. You should be educating yourself, not only about this, but about the dangerous SSRI drugs that are pushed along with this fake narrative that we get from these people all the time. That is something that affects millions of people, and you should be asking questions about that. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight.
Now, I really am going to jump off the deep end here and sound like a conspiracy theorist. I want to ask you something. Was the government involved in all these high school shootings? Now I want to read you a couple paragraphs from a book by William Cooper that is dated December 1, 1999. Could all the school shootings, Las Vegas shootings, Boston Marathon shootings, and others have been orchestrated by the CIA MK Ultra program and other in order to confiscate our weapons and destroy the Constitution in order to bring in the New World Order? Now, this is from page 225 of Behold a Pale Horse. The government encouraged the manufacture and importation of military firearms for the criminals to use. This is intended to foster a feeling of insecurity, which would lead the American people to voluntarily disarm themselves by passing laws against firearms, using drugs and hypnosis on mental patients in the process called Orion. The CIA inculcated the desire in these people to open fire in schoolyards and thus inflame and the anti-gun lobby. The plan is well underway and so far is working perfectly. The middle class is begging the government to do away with the Second Amendment. Now, I would suggest that everybody get this book. You can get it free and download it online from readablefiles.wordpress.com. Now, this slide is from hn.net/Q Research. Now, if you are familiar with QAnon, this was published the day after the Parkland school shooting. This was published on February 15th. Every one of these school shootings that's mentioned in this article, and I only cover in this screenshot, I can only cover so much, but there's a lot more, and they all follow the same plan as mentioned in William Cooper's book. Eric Harris, age 17, first on Zoblat, then Lovex. And Dylan Kibold, age 18, Columbine school shooting in Littleton, Arkansas, killed 12 students, 1 teacher, and wounded 23 others before killing themselves. Kibold's medical records have never been made available to the public. Jeff Weiss, age 16, been prescribed 60 megagrams per day of Prozac, 3 times the average starting dose for adults. When he shot his grandfather's girlfriend, and many fellow students at Red Lake, Minnesota, he then shot himself. 10 dead, 12 wounded. Corey Badsgard, age 16, Guadalupe, Washington State High School, was on Paxil, which caused him to have hallucinations. When he took a rifle to his high school and held 23 classmates hostage, he has no memory of the event. And there are others. It is all this source material. When you read this, and you read what William Cooper wrote in his book, it all begins to make sense. And it all ties together. There are agents in the government, in both the FBI and the CIA, NSA, and others, that want to do away with our current Constitution, totally destroy it, and rewrite it, where you'll have no freedom of speech, no Bill of Rights. You will do what you're told and only what you're told. These are fascists, just like Nazi Germany, just like the Soviet Union, just like Communist China. Anybody that speaks out, you're dead. It's that simple. And these guys will use drugs, brainwashing, hypnosis, whatever it takes to meet their objective. Because their main objective is building a one world government run by the Antichrist. George Bush called it that they're building a new world order. Same difference, just a different name. But the new world order is going to be run by what the Bible calls the Antichrist. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Nuremberg Principles and read the principles to you. Now, the Nuremberg trials happened right after World War II, when the Nazi hierarchy, all the way down to the privates, were executed and imprisoned. And out of these Nuremberg trials came what's called the Nuremberg Principles, which is part of international law. Now, there is a difference between a lawful order and an unlawful order. If the police officers know that there's shootings going on inside a school and they're told to stand down, that cannot be a lawful order. And if they obey that unlawful order, they are as guilty as the privates that were guarding Auschwitz, who were executed. Their excuse was, oh, we were just following the orders. We didn't know what was going on. It didn't wash during the Nuremberg trials, and it should not wash today. The CIA officers that gave the orders, the MK orders, is as guilty as the shooter. The FBI officers that gave the orders that stand down are as guilty as the murderers. Those that planned the shooting are just as guilty as the shooter. This is the result of the Nuremberg Principles. And the Nuremberg Principles became part of international law. Number 1, any person who commits an act which constitutes a crime under international law is responsible, therefore, and liable to punishment. Number 2, the fact that internal law does not impose a penalty for an act which constitutes a crime under international law does not relieve the person who committed the act from responsibility under international law. Number 3, the fact that a person who committed an act which constitutes a crime under international law acted as head of state or responsible government official does not relieve him from responsibility under international law. Number 4, the fact that a person acting pursuant to orders of his government or other superior does not relieve him from responsibility under international law, provided a moral choice was in fact possible to him. This principle could be paraphrased as follows. It is not an acceptable excuse to say, I was just following my superior's orders. Previous to the time of the Nuremberg trials, this excuse was known in common practice as superior orders. After a prominent high-profile event of the Nuremberg trials, that excuse is now referred to by many as the Nuremberg defense. In recent times, a third term, lawful orders, has become common parlance for some people. All three terms are in use today, and they all have slightly different nuances of meaning depending upon the context in which they are used. Nuremberg Principle 4 is legally supported by the jurisprudence found in certain articles in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which deal indirectly with conscientious objection. It is also supported by the principles found in paragraph 171 of the Handbook of Procedures and Criteria for Determining Refugee Status, which was issued by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioners for Refugees. Those principles deal with the conditions under which conscientious objectors can apply for refugee status in another country if they first face persecution in their own country for refusing to participate in an illegal war. Principle 5. Any person charged with a crime under international law has the right to a fair trial on the facts and laws. The crimes hereafter set out are punishable as crimes under international laws. Crimes against peace: planning, preparation, initiating, or waging war of aggression on or a war in violation of international treaties, agreements, or assurances. Participation in a common plan or conspiracy for the accomplishment of any of the acts mentioned under I. War crimes: violations of the laws or customs of war, which include but are not limited to murder, ill treatment, or deportation to slave labor, or for any other purpose of civilian population or occupied territory, murder, ill treatment of prisoners of war or persons on the seas, killing of hostages, plunder of public or private property, wanton destruction of cities, towns, or villages, or devastation not justified by military necessity. Crimes against humanity: murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, and other inhumane acts done against any civilian population, or persecutions on political, racial, or religious grounds. When such acts are done, or such persecutions are carried on in execution or in connection with any crime against peace or any war crime. Complicity in the commission of a crime against peace, a war crime, or a crime against humanity, as set forth in Principle 6, is a crime under international law. And this is from the Wikipedia. Now we see a picture of Hermann Goering. And during his trial in Nuremberg in 1946, he stated, "Why, of course the people don't want war. Why would some poor slob on a farm want to risk his life in a war when the best that he can get out of it is to come back to his farm in one piece?" Naturally, the common people don't want war, neither in Russia, nor in England, nor in America, nor for that matter in Germany. That is understood. But after all, it is the leaders of the country who determine the policy. And it is always a simple matter to drag the people along. Whether it is a democracy or a fascist dictatorship or a parliament or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same way in any country. Now, politicians and government leaders always figure out a way to cover up their crimes. They consider the citizen as a serf of their feudal state. They create tragedies, i.e. school massacres, for their own nefarious reasons. They always have a pigeon to pin the blame on, and always have an excuse planned if they get caught. Like just following orders, I was deceived and lied to, or I was forced to do it. They consider themselves superior and above the law. Next we come to the followers. Now, who are the followers? These are the ones that actually commit, enforce, plan, and enable the crime. An enabler is like the police officers who stood down so that the assassins could commit their murders. These are just like the guards at Auschwitz that enabled the gassing of the Jews. The planners follow the instructions of their superiors and plan the crime scene. All the followers are in the chain of command, obeying orders given by their superiors. You need to follow the chain from the lowest rank all the way up and arrest everyone along the way. Now, there has been talk recently about military tribunals. Steemit has a very interesting post on this very topic. A legal path to prosecution of the deep state conspiracy, military tribunals. This article links to QAnon and the White House executive order that Trump has signed. I feel that everyone should read and understand what is going on and what is coming down the pike. And please follow the link to Steemit. Our President Donald Trump is already initiating the apparatus to arrest and confine criminals, just like the Nuremberg trials did to the Nazis. Now, in the conclusion, I want to say we need to pray for both our country and our president. The Bible tells us in 1 Timothy chapter 2, I exhort therefore that first of all supplications, prayers, intercession, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings, and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. For this is good and acceptable in the sight of God, our Savior. Now, this country right now is in sad shape. I firmly believe that 2 presidents in my lifetime were put into office by God to slow down the pace toward the rise of the Antichrist and the New World Order. They were Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. Neither one of them was really part of the establishment. And I pray that Donald Trump doesn't get executed in the process, like John Kennedy was executed by the deep state. Now, all these shootings that are happening are happening for a reason. The same drugs are involved. The results are the same. This cannot be individual happenings. You have to follow the chain, link the pieces together, and you'll understand that we are in a big mess. Those that want to tell you that taking away guns is the answer. If the teachers were armed in that school, probably nobody would have died. Think about it. Except the killer. Anyway, take care and God bless you.